Good afternoon. We begin with breaking news. Russia has announced an Easter truce in Ukraine, which will last until Monday. It has officially started this hour, 6 o'clock local time, and the Kremlin says it assumes the Ukrainian side will follow its example. Well, in the last few minutes, President Zelensky tweeted this. I've just received a report from Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky. Today, our forces continued their activity on the territory of the Kursk region and are holding their positions. In the Belgorod region, our warriors have advanced and expanded our zone of control. As for yet another attempt by Putin to play with human lives at this moment, air raid alerts are spreading across Ukraine. At 17:15, Russian attack drones were detected in our skies. Ukrainian air defense and aviation have already begun working to protect us. Shahed drones in our skies reveal Putin's true attitude towards Easter and toward human life. Well, let's bring in our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett, for the latest on this. Ivor, how surprising is this announcement by the Kremlin?
Well, it is surprising in the sense that we haven't seen a ceasefire before in this war that's been going on for nearly 3 years. So it's certainly significant in that sense. It's also significant in the sense that it is the first actual concession made by Russia as Donald Trump has pushed for peace talks. So it's 2 months since he began these peace negotiations, trying to bring an end to this 3-year conflict. But in that time, Russia has given nothing at all. There's been no sign of compromise from Moscow, no concessions whatsoever, only demands. So in that sense, it is significant. Suddenly, a unilateral ceasefire has been declared by Vladimir Putin for Easter. It has begun right now, this hour, 6 o'clock local time. It runs until midnight tomorrow. From Sunday into Monday, so 30 hours, and it was announced by Vladimir Putin in a televised conversation with his military chief Valery Gerasimov. But this is a ceasefire on Vladimir Putin's terms. It's something, it's by no means everything, and there is always a but when it comes to Russia. It is nothing like what Donald Trump has been asking for. You'll remember that Donald Trump's first demand, first aim, was to try and get a 30-day ceasefire. This is only 30 hours, so it's a long way short of that. Ukraine agreed, Russia didn't. Russia only imposed a list of demands. Then Donald Trump and his team tried to secure a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. But again, that has never actually been implemented, although Russia said it was for a maritime ceasefire. It said it would only take part in one if it got something back in return first, and that was for certain sanctions to be lifted. But since then, frustration has clearly been growing on the US side with the lack of progress towards a peace, some sort of peace, a ceasefire. There has been talk of the US side growing angry with Russia. Donald Trump himself said he was angry with Vladimir Putin at the lack of progress. And yesterday we heard from his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, the strongest indication yet that the US side was running out of patience when he said that they will walk away potentially within days if they didn't get anything. But now suddenly Vladimir Putin has reacted, and it feels like he knows that patience is wearing thin here. It feels like he's giving the White House just enough to keep them interested, keep them on side. And the way it's being presented here is very interesting indeed. It's being presented as a proposal from Russia, presenting Russia as the peacemaker, putting all the pressure on Ukraine, saying it's now up to them to agree. For example, Russia's Ministry of Defense said Russian troops will adhere to the ceasefire provided it is mutually respected by Ukraine. We also heard Vladimir Putin say we assume that Ukraine will follow our example. There you go. See, suggesting that Russia is the one who is the peacemaker here, that Kyiv and Volodymyr Zelensky is the warmonger. But as you heard from Zelensky there, he is saying it's certainly the other way around. So yes, a ceasefire, but on Vladimir Putin's terms.
Ivor, let me just pick up on a point that you were making, the comments by Marco Rubio and then also by Donald Trump that basically the U.S. might lose patience if these peace talks don't go anywhere. You know, we can read this reaction from Russia as having to do with that. But if the U.S. did pull out of these talks, how bad would that be for Russia?
Well, it depends what they pull out of. If they pull out from the peace negotiations, then I don't think that would be too much of a problem for Moscow, because they, of course, have the upper hand on the battlefield. And that's why I think Russia hasn't been on the front foot when it comes to wanting or taking part in the peace negotiations. Ukraine has, it seems, has been making all the running and agreeing to whatever Donald Trump has put forward. Russia has always added strings because they have no incentive at the moment. They fear, of course, if there is a ceasefire, then Ukraine will just rearm, regroup, and they will lose the initiative. So in that sense, I don't think they'll be too bothered if the US walks away from the peace negotiations. However, I think they would be bothered if the US walks away from the rapprochement that has begun between Moscow and Washington. It wasn't clear from Marco Rubio's comments yesterday if that was the case. They just said walk away. Didn't make it clear if that was just from the peace talks or also from the talks going on with Moscow. And I think that would be a problem for Russia. Vladimir Putin wants to be brought back into the international fold. He wants there to be that contact with the White House. He sees lots of benefits there. He's continued to pursue that those line of talks whilst the ceasefire talks and the peace talks have somewhat stalled. So I think potentially that is what has forced his hand here. It's not clear, but certainly I think he's wary that potentially the US will walk away from that, and he doesn't want to lose that. And so he's presenting himself as the one who's putting forward peace here, hoping that Donald Trump will believe that Vladimir Putin is the peacemaker rather than Ukraine.
Ivor Bennett, our Moscow correspondent. Ivor, thank you for that.